Today I'm going to grind my first recurve ever that I've ground. It's going to be a hollow grind. I'm going to use this profile. It's 1/4 inch 1075 steel. I'm going to document that process today. I'll be using the tooling bevel guide to do that with. I'll show how I set it up. And I've never ground one of these before, so this will be an adventure for everyone. So let's get started. Alright, so the first step of the process is going to be to profile the blank. I'll do that on this machine. My work rest in place. I'm going to go with a 36 grit on this, just to get it cleaned off fast. I'll be running the belt over 7,000 surface feet per minute during this process. Alright, so I've made a big mess. I've got the profile down pretty good. I'm going to put a small wheel on and clean this area out here. Do a little cleaning in there. Then I'll make a carrier for it and be ready to start the bevel. This belt has a pinch option here. I'm not using that now. I'm not getting into that small, but if I needed to, I could really pinch that belt down inside there. So I've got the guide set up. Got it in the vertical position on the wheel that I wanted it in. And I'm just going to grind at the center of the wheel to get the maximum height out of the hollow grind. And then what I've done here is I've rotated the guide 4 degrees offside of center on the wheel, or offside of square, so that I'll end up grinding on just this side of the wheel here, about this last half inch, or this side half inch of the wheel. Okay, so I've got made a little follower out of plywood. These are pretty simple to make. So it'll follow the profile from the tip all the way around to this point. And this will ride on, there's a little bolt head in here, this will ride on that bolt head. That way the blank always, and this will be clamped to the blank, that way the blank will always have a positive depth stop in the guide so you don't overgrind it. Now I'm going to set the thickness distance here so that this rides snugly in there and doesn't have any movement this direction. So I just put both pieces in there and push it in snug to take up any gaps so that this can slide like this but not rotate like that. Okay, next thing I've done, this might be difficult to see, try to keep it moving so it can be seen. I've drawn a line where I want my bevel to go. I want it to start here and head up at this angle, and then it'll go along that direction. But I want it to be slightly angled, so it's going to come along this way. I'll use a plunge stop to set that position. So here's my line that I want for the plunge. And what I've done is I used a 1-inch wide ruler to just line up against there, and then I've set it to make this parallel on the other side so that I have room for it to fit into the guide and reach the belt. Now this will bump on the outside of the guide for the stop. That's where it will, that's its control point. So now I'm ready to start grinding. I'll add another clamp to the thing here. The stop is snug. Machine is set. We'll start going. Alright, now you can see how this is going to work. This will go in and actually bump against the guide, and the knife will be in this up position, and that will cause it to cut an angled plunge line. So when it comes in, goes up and it sets it. And then I'll use this later to actually work over to the plunge line. When I do the initial cut, I cut just away a little bit from the line. I don't cut right up to the line when I'm cutting the actual bevel. And then later I'll eke over and clean up the plunge area. Alright, one of the things I didn't do was when I had the guide in position, then when I rotated it, I didn't pay attention that it actually moved over. So I want to be this way a little bit more, because I've already passed up my plunge line there by 80 thousandths. So I'll back up a ways so that I come in on the knife side here. But you can see that it's tracking really nicely around. And then I'll just keep working that bevel Alright, so you see it's progressing very, very nicely, in fact. And what I've done is when I first started it, I cut a little bit too far past the line I wanted, then I backed up, and it went too far the other way. It was about 3/16 on this side, so when I made the final adjustment, I've come into about 1/16 of an inch, or about 50 thousandths of the plunge line target, the target line for the plunge. And then when I'm done cutting this, the main piece of the bevel, I'll come back in and creep the guide over slightly by adjusting and loosening to get to the line, and I'll just cut that separately. It was a little bit rough around the tip, and I need to work on my technique. And then that's just a spot where I went in and I haven't ground yet. But it's progressing really nice. You see how it's tracking the edge perfectly. This is an 80 grit belt, by the way. Alright, so I'm starting to get a feel for it. See that I've got a little bit. I need to adjust my method a little bit around here to keep a little more steady. But that line is as clean as you can get. I mean, wow. That's all I got to say. It's looking really awesome. This is the first one I've ever done. This is my first recurve, and it's going to look like a very experienced person did it. And this is my very first one ever. measure the thickness of that. It's looking really beautiful, actually. What's happening is the position of the plunge stop and the position of the bolt head are such that when the plunge stop hits the side of the guide, this part goes slightly past center and down the other side of the bolt slightly, and is causing that to pop up a little bit. So that's going to take a little adjustment for the future. And also I'm taking a little practice to learn how to get around this corner here. But overall, it's a very nice looking bevel at this point. Material removal has been very even along the edge. I will, this is an 80, I'll take it down again before I move positions. The plunge seems to have creeped over, which is one of the reasons that I set it about a 1/16 of an inch off anyway. And so I'm not going to actually go this direction any farther to try to get to the plunge, because I feel like I'm close enough to it and I'm happy with where it's at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the thickness with a caliper and see how much material I've removed. And then I'll check how high I've gone here. And if we've got enough, then I will hit it with a 120 and then probably a Scotch-Brite belt, and then we'll flip it over. Alright, so the caliper measured this at 140, and that means I've removed, this is a 1/4 inch thick, so I've removed 0.11 or 110 thousandths of an inch off with the 80, and now I want to go and hit it with a 120, remove a little bit more, and then I'll flip it over. So to remove the belt, or change belts, I'll loosen this up and pull this back out of the way. Check the square. Put this back in. Now this dimension really doesn't matter now, because I have backed out the guide, and so when I get ready to grind again, I'll just move the guide in until it contacts the wheel. We'll start from there. Alright, now everything's centered back up. The clamping system automatically centers itself back up. You don't have to worry about slop like in steel tubes and things like that. So now I'm right back in, got the same angle, and ready to grind. Continue grinding in that same place. I'm going to slow the belt down a little bit more. Normally I will grind a lot faster than this once I have a grind established. You know, after I've ground a few and I understand what the settings are that I need, then I can turn the machine way up and grind over 7,000 surface feet per minute on the initial heavy ones. And then even on this one, I would still grind faster than I'm going to. Now I'll be grinding half speed down about 3,500 surface feet per minute, in that range. Alright, it's cleaned up really nice with the 120. The line's clean, sharp. I'm going to go ahead and hit it with a belt. We'll do the same drill again. Let's pull this back. We'll hit it with a red belt. See what that does. Check my tracking. Tracking looks good. We'll bring this in. I'm going to back this out a little ways. Call that good there. I'm going to run the belt quite a bit slower. The Scotch-Brite quite a bit slower. Contact yet. Yeah, I can feel it grinding. So the camera ran out of space on its disc before I finished. After the Scotch-Brite at 120 grit, I decided I didn't like that finish, so I put on a 320 belt, and I like this finish a lot better. Needs a little bit more, a tiny bit more buffing. You can see right there, there's a tiny spot. Most of that would come out with a sharpening. Around here's a little spot, and that'll just take a little more practice. I mean, this is my first recurve. You can see that the line is really sharp and clean all the way across. The distance is uniform. I would say pretty darn good for a guy's first attempt at a hollow ground recurve.